Good morning, everyone. Thank you for all being here today for what will be a valuable discussion on cybersecurity. My name is Jeannie Rucker, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this hybrid event focused on securing your business in an evolving digital landscape. Looking ahead, we have an exciting upcoming event, October 24th, focusing on talent acquisition and retention strategies. It's about hiring and improving retention in today's competitive job market. So be sure to mark your calendars. And on November 13th, we invite you to attend our Toast to Trusted Leaders event, recognizing leading organizations committing to building trust in the communities. It's a wonderful celebration and fantastic networking. Cybersecurity is more than a buzzword. It's a critical aspect of every business, no matter the size. That's why we're honored to have a panel of some of the top IT experts in the region to guide us through today's conversation. For those of you here in person, you feel free to network post the event once the panelists have finished the discussion. And for those joining us online, thank you for being with us. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. It is my pleasure to introduce Angela Mazzacco. Angela Mazzacco from AVAAP, a leading IT services and management consulting firm specializing in digital transformation, improving efficiency, and enabling companies to adapt to evolving industry challenges by leveraging technology. He has a stellar background. He's a board member of the American Heart Association, and he played an integral role in hospitals and physicians' offices sharing medical history so they can help take care of patients. My favorite highlight is that he has been a professor at both The Ohio State University and Otterbein University, and I was lucky to be in one of his classes. I thank all the panelists for your time today. I'm going to turn it over to Angela, who will lead the discussion. Thank you for your time.
I think you got an A in that class.
That's now.
That's why you called me.
Sure.
Well, thank you, Ginny. And this is very exciting. We do need to take cybersecurity a lot more seriously than I think we have in the past. Just in the past couple of months, the two largest cities in Columbus or in Ohio, both Columbus and Cleveland, have gotten clobbered. Now, if you're a small business owner or a medium business owner, you may be saying, well, they're big organizations, but I'll tell you what, they're coming after the small just as much as they are the big. I'm going to go ahead and have each person introduce themselves, because I would not be able to do justice, because I want you to highlight what you can. But what I'm going to highlight is this. I have employed, from a business standpoint, most of the folks here on the panel. And that is for cyber work that they had done at companies where I was a CIO or CEO. And that's probably why I asked that they come here, because I was very dependent on them at that point in time, and probably would be today if I had my own company again. So let's go ahead and start with Matt.
I'm Matt Curtin. I'm the founder of Interhack Corporation in Columbus. We are a cybersecurity computer expert firm. We help organizations to understand, especially the mechanism of their computer systems and how things are actually working and what the side effects are. And then in the event of some kind of problem, we help them put the pieces back together and spend some time in court testifying about that in trial.
I'm Doug Davidson. I am with GBQ Partners. Why is an accounting firm interested in cybersecurity? They were worried about helping clients build wealth and secure wealth. They acquired my firm in 2016, and since then we have come in and helped our clients find their information assets, secure them, and then have them or help them build an ongoing continuous improvement program so they stay ahead of the bad guys.
I'm Kurt Heft. I'm CEO of EasyIT. EasyIT is a managed services firm. We do IT outsourcing and co-sourcing. We support about 8,000 endpoints across almost 60 companies. We always have to focus on securing our clients' environments in order to keep them stable and keep them productive. So cybersecurity is a big part of what we do, and end up working with several of these fellows, particularly Doug, together on a lot of our clients for their compliance and security purposes.
Hi, my name is Charles Robbins. I'm the standards officer for the Ohio Cyber Reserve. We have units in Cleveland, so we're in 3 areas of Ohio: Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. So we're about 200 strength right now, and we concentrate on protecting the approximately 18,500 critical infrastructure in Ohio. So what we do in the state, we're one of 6 entities in the state that has been put in by law to help with all these other elements in Ohio to protect Ohio.
So we really think we've got everything covered here. Charles, in particular, having more of the government, the state perspective, and really is a part of legal organization. Kurt, along the way, is really out there helping clients. He mentioned 60 that he's making sure are as compliant as possible and making sure the bad guy, the hackers, aren't getting in. Doug, at one point was more similar to Kurt's organization, but he has since joined forces with GBQ so that it's not only a cyber company, but also a compliance. I view them just as much as a compliance company as well. And then Matt has historically, if you see him on the Channel 10 News every so often, and he has historically been the one that may get brought in once the damage is done and you're trying to figure out what the heck happened. So that being said about each of you, I'm going to be all over the board in terms of questions, but let's start with Doug. And Doug, what role should business owners and business management play in their company's cybersecurity efforts?
I think at the first level, they need to know where their important information is. And then whether it's a managed service provider or it's your own IT people, to understand and ask questions about what they're doing to properly protect the most important assets. And we have limited dollars to spend and to know where those assets are, and then to have an expectation that whoever's doing your security, whether it's a managed service or somebody that's working for you, that they can speak back to you about how they're covering it. And don't just trust the IT team, but trust but verify, check with them, learn a little bit along the way about the topic so that you can communicate with them.
I think that's an important aspect. If your IT team, and I've led IT teams for the dispatch, for Central Ohio Primary Care, and also for what's now called Optum. If your IT team is bringing in their own folks to do this kind of work, I would question it. I think bringing an independent third party who that's what they do, there's something to be said about that. And in this day and age, you have to question, if you're a business owner, that you're getting the right review of your environment. So, Kurt, what do you think is the largest security challenge that small medium businesses have to deal with these days?
Yeah, there's one clear thing that stands out for us recently. It's attacks against primarily your Office 365 tenants. Statistically, it'll be attacked 5 times as much as any of your on-premise infrastructure. And because it's integrated with your on-premise infrastructure, it's a good doorway to get into everything else. We've been seeing an incredible amount of token theft attacks. For years, we've been talking about strong passwords, 2-factor, multi-factor authentication. Those things function because they create a small file called a token on your local machine. When you have that, you don't have to let them authenticate into your tenant every time you say go into Outlook, because you've got that. Well, that can be stolen. And if it's stolen, it can be just placed on another machine and they're authenticated as you until it expires. So we feel this year that the theft of those has been perfected. And the bad part is, if you are compromised in that fashion, you probably will have no idea that it's happened, because it's just stuff happening in the background in your mail client, where your SharePoint resides, where your OneDrive resides. That all could be being backed up remotely. You just get no notification. So That's what we're fighting a lot lately. There are ways to handle that. But, 2 years ago, that was a thing that really wasn't a thing. Now it's the thing we seem to see. Yeah.
Thank you. Matt, these problems that you see occur out there, since many times you're coming in after the fact, how much of the problem is risky behavior within the organization or, even beyond, and how much of it is technology?
It's almost never technology. It's technology can enable it, can exacerbate it, but it's typically somebody misusing technology or doing something that is just ill-advised. Rule of thumb, trying to get something for nothing isn't going to get you anywhere except in trouble. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So people have apps they put on their phones, they have things that they put on their computers, they have services they just sign up for, they upload their documents, they move things around. And as a consequence, they make the attack surface much larger. And so there's just many more ways to be able to get to the information and compromise.
I have an add-on.
That's such a nice way to put it.
I'm going to give you a second question, Matt, and that is, let's say my business is small and uninteresting. Yeah, it's insurance, right? I'm not a target, right? Or I shouldn't be a target.
Well, if you've got your email hosted at Microsoft 365, I think Kurt might have a statistic that's of interest to you. And that's the big thing to think about, is that a lot of people have this concept in mind, like it's some kind of a movie. And there's a bad guy and he's wearing a hoodie and he's looking around for targets and he's finding some big juicy target and then going after the target. That's not the way it works. What he's doing is he's scanning in an automated fashion, trying every doorknob on every door. And so just going around the whole internet, trying every network. Well, if you've got a hosted environment like Office 365, there are a zillion doors that can be opened there and you're in there. Yeah. So that's basically the issue, is that why you're on premises, it actually winds up having a lower profile and in the end might counterintuitively give you some ability to hide. But even so, they're still going to try the door. So boring, uninteresting, doesn't matter. $5,000 in the US might not be a lot of money, but in Eastern Europe, it'll go a really, really long way.
Very interesting. Yep. Charles, I don't think I've been in a conversation with you where you haven't mentioned NIST. And so let's talk about it. How important is it for a small business to download the NIST Core V2 cybersecurity framework and begin an assessment? Now, you do have to explain that because some of our listeners may not know what we're talking about here. So help us out.
So like if, today we have baseball championships going on, we have football going on, and everybody, in order to understand the game, you have to understand, what is football, what is baseball. Well, in cybersecurity, NIST in the United States is that, it's the framework. So when your organization goes in and they just updated the core, was core 1.1, now it's core 2 in March of 2024. You download it and there's 107 rules, we'll call data security controls. And in that, it is split into 6 categories that allows the organization, and that's keyword because I've been hearing it from your experts here. The organization has to have an emphasis on cybersecurity, not just the IT department, so that when IT comes out and puts out mandates, that the rest of the organization is willing to follow. So they added what was called governance and created that 6. So there's 5 elements in a circle when you look at this symbol, and then around all that is this brand new one called governance. And governance means that everything from the boss to department heads now are supporting it. And if I would go in and see a company that was doing this, it would be like they would be talking about it in a daily meeting. Like, what are we doing? That cybersecurity needs to go from having it like we practice one day a year for security awareness training to now it's almost like a daily, like we're breathing, like it's something that we're doing. So in all, this is a framework that allows companies to successfully do what these gentlemen are talking about. And then when you do meet these companies in Ohio, it makes sense to you.
If I could jump on to that. So NIST, I mean, we think about, oh, this is all this newfangled stuff, right? Well, NIST is not newfangled. It's not a new thing. It's the National Institute for Standards and Technology. This is the organization in the US government, part of the Department of Commerce, that sets standards that allow for things like commerce to happen. So trying to set standards for, how to measure something, the parameters under which something must be able to operate to make sure that it stays within tolerance so that they have some compatibility, that sort of thing. It's all part of NIST's mandate. And so it makes sense for security to be included in what they're covering. And this is an organization that understands how to create standards and how to help people recognize how to behave in a way that is going to be compliant for the purpose of being able to advance commerce, for being able to work interoperably. And so it's not like it's exotic. It might sound exotic because we're talking about computer stuff, but in the end, this is just the 21st century adoption of the way that we have always been able to work together.
No, I think that's a great point from both of you. The thing that I want to make sure we remember is that a lot of our business owners who might be listening, maybe small business owners, that maybe that's not top of mind or they're not as well versed. So yeah, it's definitely important and it comes up all the time, especially when I talk to Charles. So Doug, how should small firms manage third parties who have their information? It seems today that you're required many times to pass information, and there's a lot more other companies outside of yours who has access to that information. So how do you manage that?
Well, I think when all of us started our careers, it was one business, and that business did everything. You had HR, you had finance, you had maybe benefits within the HR department, marketing. We outsource all that now. And it used to be your business system, your ERP, your general ledger was in a server room. Your marketing tools were in a server room or on a laptop. That's all out there now. In the cloud, software as a service applications. We talked about 365. When we get involved in businesses trying to recover from something, most often now it's a third party involved. And you have your IT department, and they're focused on, whether it's IT or a managed service, they're focused on your gear, your software, not what's outside. But a lot of times we find the most valuable information, part of what GBQ does is financial audits. Most of those ERP systems now are sitting in the cloud. And your IT department's not the one to ask what happens if, well, probably a lot of you QuickBooks, some of the bigger firms, NetSuite, what happens if NetSuite's ransomed? And people say, well, a big firm like that will never be ransomed. We've seen in the restaurant industry, firms that there have been 3 ransomwares in the restaurant industry with ERP systems. So you as a business owner, again, need to know where your things are, need to adopt NIST, which includes an attention to third-party risk management. And that's more of a contract agreement issue than it is an issue related to what the IT department does.
Very good.
That's a great point. Actually, the automotive industry just had some large attacks too, and their dealership management system providers, like their largest ones. And so you think that they're big companies, they're going to handle it well. This won't be a problem. Don't take that for granted. Anyone can be infiltrated, and then you need to have a plan for if they are, and probably need to do your due diligence to understand what they're going to do if they have an event and have to recover. You just always assume that you will have an event, but how well will you be able to find it and recover? So they should be able to explain that.
There's some Doug mentioned that is many times overlooked is the fact that we aren't just one company anymore, right?
Right.
That you're outsourced, you've got partners, you've got other organizations that you're sharing information with, and it's not as easy at all as it always seems. And I think we'll get on the cloud too, because that's the other, remember the old Microsoft commercial, just put it on the cloud, right?
Yeah.
And everything will be fine.
Yeah, so we got everybody to buy firewalls to keep the bad guys out of our systems. They're on the inside, and then we moved all of our data on the outside of the firewall. Coincidence?
Yeah. Well, and I think you still need to use due diligence, until I left COPC, I was still not allowing patient information to go outside of the on-prem, meaning for those who aren't aware that means that we were using patient data stored on premises. And it was because of my and everybody's fear of possibly allowing that information to go loose, which that to me is the worst thing you can do, even more than financial, is patient information. So
Yeah. Well, one thing, Angelo, to jump in, if you contract with a cloud service, and none of us are attorneys, I'll say that right now. If you look at a cloud service, most cloud services have what's called a shared responsibility clause in the contract. And that's what you're supposed to do. And many times that the 365 breaches, many times it's the firm that's not managing it. They think, oh, Microsoft's got it all, or my ERP vendor has it all. And in the contract, it says you're going to do these things. And it's those, I'm going to use ill-advised, I'm going to steal it. Those ill-advised things that you're not doing the right things, and you've contracted that you're going to be responsible. So the ERP or the Microsoft's able to dodge responsibility because it's your responsibility.
yeah.
If I could just add to that, I mean, I make a joke about the firewall, but I mean, the sort of the theme here is that, you know, it used to be that, you know, it was all the nerds in the basement that had the machinery going, and that everybody just figured, okay, they take care of everything. Well, what are they doing down there? I don't know. What are you getting out of it? I don't know. How much are you paying for it? Well, I know that. And so what's happened is that IT has had to grow up. And so you've mentioned it. Doug's talked about it a lot. We've talked about the impacts and the standards and all of these things. And sort of the theme here is we're talking about adult supervision. And so now it's not a matter of the technology and of the nerds in the basement, but now we have things like agreements that are documented in writing, and that those, if they are well written, will have the responsibility of all of the parties in there, so that people can understand what to expect from one another. That's the area that I see a lot of maturation happening right now, because there are some of those shared responsibility clauses, but not all contracts have them.
Mhm.
And in a lot of cases, there is nobody tells the counterparty that, you know, you do have some responsibility here, even if it's in the contract. Sometimes the contract language doesn't get to the point where it's part of somebody's training so that they understand day to day what they're supposed to do.
None of us are lawyers, but we all of a sudden sound like we are.
Well, that depends.
Yeah.
Kurt, you know, and this I think relates very nicely. You know, as a business guy, I've got to be sitting watching this saying, oh my gosh, how in the world do I minimize my insurance premiums, you know, especially as it relates to all this? What do you have to say about that, Kurt?
Yeah, so not all of the effort and investment that companies put into securing themselves is just money spent. There is a return there, and that it should drive better premiums for your company. So when you follow general best practices, even if you loosely follow a NIST framework, which no small business is going to do on their own because they don't know what NIST framework is, but if they have a good partner for that, or if they have a talented internal person, they're going to know the fundamentals. They're going to be able to identify what they're protecting. They're going to be able to detect things when they actually happen. They're going to be able to respond if there is something that's happening, and they're going to be able to demonstrate that they should be able to recover if they do have that event. So if you look at it those ways and you do the fundamentals, you're going to have better premiums. It's easy to skip some of the fundamentals, unfortunately. And oddly, the people that want to skip them the most are the executives, the people like me, the chief executives, that just don't want to hassle with that nuisance of securing my own logins. And so the proper mindset that says we're not going to be negligent. We're going to do at least the fundamentals. We're not necessarily going to go all the way in towards compliance, and maybe it's not even appropriate, but never be called negligent at the end of the day. Like, what do you mean you weren't using two-factor authentication on things that are public facing? What do you mean you didn't back things up? Or you back things up, but only just locally, and it's accessible from the same machines that you're trying to protect. So if that machine gets compromised, they're probably compromising your backup. So there goes your ability to restore. Was that negligent? Certainly wasn't well thought through.
So a lot of things that you're talking about there is what we stress when we're working with critical infrastructure is once a year, minimum once a year, and a lot of good organizations maybe do it twice a year. They'll actually they'll identify their incident response team. Now, the incident response team at a small, medium-sized business might be involving the IT support company that they're bringing in.
Should.
But the thing is that they practice once a year. You'd be amazed when you go to a company's first practice, because a lot of times that's the first time all the parties get together and they get to meet each other. You can imagine if it's a real exercise like you're talking about, not exercise, but a real event. And then this is the first time everybody's met and the pressure's on them. The ideal situation is like what you're talking about. It's the preparation, getting together, knowing who's going to do what for that incident response. And it could make it from being to where we have it solved by Wednesday, or whether it's going to be solved a month later. So for all the small business owners out there, if you got to go in and work on something for a month, you know how much that's going to cost. If you have a practice team where those individuals get together once or twice a year, then that brings value to all your services that you're bringing into the company.
Yeah, if I could say something tying tabletop to cyber liability insurance, some of you may have cyber liability insurance that requires you to do tabletop or a test in terms of how long it's going to take you to restore.
Explain tabletop.
Tabletop is essentially, I'm going to role play. That's what Charles was speaking about. I'm going to role play something happen. So I put executives in the room. If I'm a big company, there may be a lot of C-suite people. If it's a small company, it may be the owner and the IT manager and the managed service provider that supports them. And you're going to role play what happens if Microsoft is breached, or what happens if I lose my general ledger system. We do a lot of that, and sometimes and this is what Charles is alluding to, we need to go on the server and get the incident response plan. Well, that's the server that's been ransomware. So you game this out and find out what you have in place to detect, respond, and recover, which comes from NIST, and learn those lessons. And it's just like, Ohio State's hopefully practicing pretty hard this week for Oregon. We have to practice to be able to perform. Cyber liability insurance many times requires it, and it's an interesting kind of insurance because sometimes your broker will do it for you. Sometimes the carrier will do it for you. We get called a lot for that kind of things, and the first thing we say is talk to your insurance company first. But we can do it, but if they're doing it, you're already paying for it. And that's essential to know what's going to happen in advance if something bad happens.
And if you have a good broker, if you have a good carrier, they're going to have an expert that can sit down in plain English and explain, are you doing these things? And by the way, here are things that would negate your policy. If you're allowing personal machines on your network, this policy is actually not going to work. Mm-hmm. They should be able to walk you through the pitfalls, identify the things that are absolutely out of bounds that you should not be doing or should be doing perhaps, and be a good partner in that. It's a mediocre to bad vendor that's going to sell you insurance and not walk you through how to get the best rates on those.
So 2 takeaways right away are number one, and I could tell you with the physician group over at COPC, we actually did that. We brought in Chubb. Chubb was now whether you like Chubb or not is not the point. It's just the fact that they were there and walked with us through, here's what we're going to do if something happened. And they were able to tell us how much of all that stuff they could do. And we had no idea because we thought we were going to have to do everything as the internal department. And we're thinking, oh my gosh, should something bad happen, how are we going to get it all done? And Chubb was like, we got people just for that to do that. So remember, involve your insurance company right away, especially the one who you have your cyber insurance with.
But the other thing is, to add on your point, those are the thing and bring in your partners. And partners, the one we see organizations, it's like 25% internal and then 75% is cloud. Yeah. But what NIST added was data flows. And when you do a data flow, it's basically what your company does, from invoicing to emails to your cameras working and all those things like that. Whenever we do data flows in per the NIST standard, it's AM4, I think AM4. So when you're doing them now for the first time, you imagine you're an executive or the boss or a department head. You actually know where all your stuff is. And as we ventured to the cloud over the last decade, a lot of people don't know where all their stuff is until something happens. So doing the data flows, which is, I like data flows versus a 15-page report. A data flow is basically a one-page picture that goes in, and any of these gentlemen, including the Cyber Reserve, can show you how to do a data flow. And it's basically a diagram that shows for each process how to go about it. Once you have that done, then all of a sudden one of these gentlemen is going to say, well, where's your backup? If this one is a single point of failure, who's going to be, what's our secondary? It arises all kind of business related questions so that you are prepared, because a lot of times if you do lose a primary, like you get notified by a primary vendor, like we did with the individuals, writing checks out a couple years ago. I can't remember the name of the company, but they were off the net for 90 days. When you do a data flow, then you would ask yourself a departmental question. Who is going to be my backup if that disappears for 90 days because they received a ransomware attack? So data flows are after you start to go in and you establish a process, but you got to know what to defend, which I heard them talk about your attack surface and such like that. When you do your data flows, you define your attack surface, and now you can see it in a picture. Americans still like to see a picture versus a 15-page written report.
I do.
So the 2 points I was trying to make was, number one, get your insurance person involved. But number two, have one of these guys or a company like theirs involved in the process as well.
That is exactly right.
I guess one other thing that might be useful to add to that is that when we're talking about this, it might be tempting to think this is expensive and I'm doing this for the purpose of security only. But if you're looking at things like data flows, well, that actually goes into workflows. How does your business work? And this is way past just a cybersecurity thing, or even a recover from a flooding event or a fire. This can get into things like, how well are you optimizing your systems? And it turns out that you're actually wasting a lot of operational time because of an inefficient workflow. So this is a way to help improve operationally, not just resilience, but also to optimize the organization, which can help to drive profit.
Good point, Matt. Very good. Charles, back to you.
Yes, sir.
So what are the chances that a small, medium business will have a cybersecurity issue in the next year?
So we still see in the critical infrastructure, it's about 1%. So it's pretty low, but it's like what these gentlemen have been talking about is that there's even a better chance that one of your partners is going to have an event. And so then it ramps up exponentially. So let's say like you did business with the city of Columbus and you call them today, they go like, well, don't call me back for like 90 days because we're like, so that could really hamper let's say you were trying to expand something and now all of a sudden the company that you're trying to expand your business enterprise with is the subject of a cyber attack. So sometimes so if your company is doing work with 25 other companies, now all of a sudden that 1% to an actual local company is pretty low. And now all of a sudden you would probably have to say, every year I know somebody within my family circle who's been hit this year. And so that's what makes it harsh. And that's why people are probably tuned in today, because they probably know somebody. When we go to conferences, we ask individualize it. We'll say like, so we can have 100 people in an audience. And it used to be a decade ago, we say, who knows somebody that got hit personally? And it would be maybe 10%. Today, when you ask that question, 50% of the people in the crowd will raise their hand and say, I know somebody in my family circle who's been hit with a cyber attack.
And I think we talk about firms that are hit, and the news that's out, the Equifax, City of Columbus, it's all this big stuff. But we've seen where just the executive is breached, or the controller, or somebody that's important to one of the business workflows. And all it takes to damage a firm is one laptop, one person to be interfered with. And a lot of these attacks are not company-wide. They're focused on individuals.
Right, they're not the critical infrastructure.
It could be your logistic carrier. It could-
Yeah, and a third party, it could be anything.
And your critical infrastructure may be fine, but a lot of businesses, a lot more than 1%, are going to have that employee that's bound and determined to click on that ill-advised link.
Mhm.
And so they're going to have an event. Hopefully that event has a small impact. It's caught, it's trapped and remediated. But a lot of people are still very willing to give away their credentials, or the attacks are better, but people are still just not thinking through things. You know, that human firewall portion of the equation is still the weakest link.
You bring up a good point, because 1% I'm talking about is the ransomware, which is the cyber reserve. That's when we have to deploy a 10-person team. It's if you're starting to add in phishing attacks,
Successful phishing attack.
that could be
More than
much.
half.
Yeah. So
That's when someone sends a sort of a random email at somebody in the company that says, here, click on this and you'll be able to get a Starbucks coupon or something, right? And those were the ones that were the most effective, because we used to measure them. The thing about it is that we had a product that was used, that was actually created by an ex-hacker, know before. And, you know, we'd get these guys for the big stuff, but for the phishing, we'd use this product, and we had our own network administrator manage it. And with a bunch of doctors and a bunch of nurses and, you know, workers, we got approval from the board that if you clicked on it, we measured how many clicked on it. If you clicked on it, it pushed you into a training environment. If you didn't pass the training, you weren't able to get back into the system. So that was for regular employees. You had to get past that test in order to get back and work on the system. For doctors, they didn't get paid until they went back in and took the training and passed it. The thing about it was that the first time we ever ran the test, we had about 2,000 people that clicked on it. It was alarming. And, you know, the last week I was there, we had 2. Now that's still bad. You know, you want to get to 0, but I don't know of any better way, unless there's a way to automate all that. But we were actually using these products and slapping the hands, because, you know, until you can find a better way, you have to go with what works.
Sure. I like to refer to it as a healthy sense of paranoia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want that person to not want to be in that group of shame where they're a clicker and therefore think through what they're doing.
But I do think that there has to come a point in time, like, you know, if you read what was at the root of Columbus, what was at the root of Cleveland, it seems like there could have been some hacking or that were coming in through the phishing or out.
Matt mentioned cost before. And if you take a look at, you know, one thing you can do is we work with KnowBe4, and I don't know if you do as
There's
well.
other products.
But work with KnowBe4, it's really accessible. If you're a small business, you pay per user, and it's like dollars per year. And so I've got a client that says it's a process of teaching people don't do dumb stuff, and doing it and then being coached and taught. But it's a very accessible tool for people.
Matt, here's a tough question. How do I know if I'm not doing enough? How do I know? You know, that's always the tough balance, right? What should that budget be? How do I know if it's enough or not enough? How do you manage that?
You know, there was trying to think through what that looks like. You know, Kurt talked about not being negligent. So it doesn't mean that you have to do everything, that you have to be the best at everything, because you're not going to be. If you've got $1 million to protect, it doesn't make sense to spend $1 million protecting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On the other hand, it also doesn't make sense to spend nothing to protect it. You know, another way to think about it is that, you know, you don't have to be faster than the bear, you have to be faster than the guy next to you. So when you get down to that question of how do you know if you're doing enough, a couple of things. So you mentioned the phishing tests. Charles talked about doing exercises and not just tabletops. I mean, you don't have, there's a whole continuum. Again, NIST actually, there's a whole continuum of exercise that ranges from where you're just talking about something or working together or something to a full-scale exercise. People think it's real. And you don't need to do that all the time, but there are little things that you can put into your processes that will allow you to test things. So think again, in terms of financials, you have ways to audit things. There are numbers that you watch, and if something comes down over here, it should go up over here, and you have that information. The way to know that you're not covering your bases is when you don't know. When something goes down over here, there isn't something that's telling you that. If you're not aware of what's happening in the organization, that's actually what tells you that you're not doing enough to manage. Security is just one of the side effects of that inattention to your business.
Got it. Doug, I'm going to come back to you. Beyond security awareness, are there training considerations for a small company staff that should be
So
in the equation?
if I look at the know before product, you're going to sell fish. That's not enough. They have training classes. Some firms, if you're a healthcare entity, you might be teaching your clinical people. There's probably content in that LMS, that learning management system, to teach those people. If you're a retailer and you are trading, doing business with your customers with credit cards, there's an expectation that the people that touch the cards are trained to look for skimmers, devices that are put on your point of sale system to steal the card data. There needs to be a policy and a routine, and people need to be trained. We're seeing a lot of concern now in contracts with not just the data flows, but with the private information that's in those flows, and people need to be trained on how to work with that information. And then lastly, there should be an expectation that your IT department is getting certifications in the tools that you're using. A lot of the vendors have certifications, or some of the professional certifications that are out there and available, so that you're not dealing with an IT person who doesn't understand this. So your how you handle information, what your compliance requirements are, and then you need to make sure your IT team has time to train up as well.
So there's certain training modules that just about every company has, around harassment, around, those things you just shouldn't do as a good employee. This should be another one of those into a cap.
It needs to be ongoing. It's not
right.
Just, you onboard somebody and you say, don't do dumb stuff with your computer, and then you never train them ever again. That 2-3 year, maybe the executive is going to be the one that does the dumb stuff.
Was that wrong? Should I not have done that?
Yeah, that's
I complete ignorance on this whole thing.
Or I clicked it once and it did this. I'm going to click it again. Yeah, exactly.
We have a whole bunch of bosses listening and tuning in, department heads. You need, so they understand what the word KPI means, and they have KPIs for how many customers they had. They have KPIs for counting numbers. They just need to sit down in an organization, as all of you guys have talked about, is select what 3 or 4 or 5 KPIs per month, whatever cycle you do, weekly, monthly, and say, okay, what are those KPIs we're looking at? And then cybersecurity becomes you're integrated into the system. And so that way the bosses know where they're getting a kind of a report. It's all part of the monitoring. It's very executive level. But as these guys have been talking about, the detection and monitoring of the systems, but executives need to also determine, like, I would want to know, like, how many people clicked on the phishing. I want to know whether we're going up or whether we're going down. And that way an executive can make decisions on when to bring in additional help from their support partners when they see things starting to go the wrong way, versus waiting all the way to the event to where something detrimental has happened to their company. A lot of times the professionals throughout the United States will say, if you can get ahead of the game, like I think you've said it 100 times, you can't wait. If your plan is always money, you're probably going to wait to the very end, because you'll spend 0 for your defense, and then you'll just wait. And then now all of a sudden you get that $7 million bill we were talking earlier about.
Well, I mean, if that's your risk profile though, right? I mean, it depends on your organization. I mean, it's more important for a bank to be around next year than to make money. on the other hand, if you're a startup, it's more important for you to make money than to be around next year. And so that's where we cannot all have some kind of a common framework or I mean, not a framework, but a common target within the framework that says what risk is, because risk for one organization may be wildly different from another. And that's actually quite healthy, but we need to understand that as we're doing business with others.
And what Charles brought up earlier, we were talking about, what has happened in Cleveland and Columbus, where, here we are 2-3 months after the breach and still trying to get out of it.
Mhm.
And, if the paper's right, they went for it with a $7 million budget to sort of crack out of where they are. So it's really interesting. So let's come back to Kurt. Kurt, so take a situation like Columbus now, but bring it down to a small company. So that company has been breached. What do you do now? How do you recover that business? What steps do you take? And also don't overlook anything. I'm the business owner. What do I do?
Yeah, so that's a there's a lot.
That's a big question.
Right. It's fantastic if you contemplated this before you have an incident, right? So you know who to call first. If you have an external technology partner, call them. If you think you have someone actually in your systems, you need to have someone start looking at where they are and locking them out, locking things down. Err on the side of be conservative, I guess is what I'm saying. If you have hopefully you have a good insurance company. Once you figure out that you've actually had an event, you've had a breach, you're going to want to get them involved, probably your internal counsel involved, etc. But I think what a lot of business owners don't contemplate is it doesn't end there. Let's say your environment's been encrypted and you don't have a path back. You don't have backups that are valid for one reason or another. And you can usually pay the ransom, get an encryption key. Provided that key works, you're still in a world of hurt. You are restoring compromised machines. It's extremely expensive to get those machines to exist in a clean fashion again. You could be rebuilding 100% of all your endpoints, all your critical infrastructure. You could be trying to restore a server infrastructure where you don't know what the servers do because you've never documented it. So you can't just build them from scratch. And if you can't bring it from backup, or you bring it from backup, but it's so compromised that you can't then put it in production, you've got a big problem. And that's where you need a good insurance company that's going to bring in a good remediation company. And they're going to have to very thoughtfully come up with a plan for, we're going to put this critical piece back in production first. Maybe what they're trying to do is get the ability for people to get to the internet so the business is minimally functional. And then we're going to start adding these other things, incrementally rebuilding the system until we're a functional business again. It's a journey. It's super expensive. Remediation companies charge an obscene amount of money because they can. You need them at that point in time. But there's a lot to it when you think through it. Once you've got that going, you also need to figure out what you're doing just from a PR standpoint and from a liability standpoint. Do you have to start getting notifications out to people because you've done something that's impacted them? Again, a good time to be talking to your internal counsel as well as your insurance company. There's just a lot to it. I know you guys, we've been through some large remediations, and it's fascinating to see what you have to do, and it's very much a team effort. I mean, there might be 4 different companies at the table talking about how we're going to do this, who does what, and it's can be a 24-hour-a-day effort for a period of time, because time is not your friend in any of these scenarios.
When we were talking about this before, so in the Cyber Reserve, we've been with government entities where we did the training, did the preparation and such like that. When they would get hit in the last year, they had a plan. That's why it was so difficult for him to answer, because I just watch your brain turn in there, and it's like, this is a company that wasn't prepared. So for our audience out there, I would stress, and when I put things out on social media, I stress over and over, take this weekend. This is cybersecurity month. Take this weekend or maybe next weekend. And I know working on a weekend, because if you try to do it Monday through Friday internally in a company, a lot of times the department heads, you can't get everybody there. But if you can get everybody there first Saturday, maybe even if you had to do it at golf or whatever you had to do, you had to come in and say, this is going to be our topic, and we're going to start talking about it and come up with sort of planning. Because if I went and asked you the same question, I says, hey, we're planned, right? And then you would say, well, just follow your plan, start doing what you had in the plan, what you had in the exercise and the tabletop. So planning takes what was really a stressful, I'm glad I didn't get that question.
It's
like, okay.
One of the fascinating things that I've seen is when ransomware first came out. So this is when someone takes over your system, okay? It was not unusual at first for people to just pay the money, be done. What are you finding out now is that if you do pay the money, you risk that ransomware person to continue to lead you on and say, oh, you did pay $1 million, but we're going to need another $1 million. And we're seeing more and more of that, where it's become more the standard to not pay it.
I mean, it should have always been the standard. I mean, the fact of the matter is you're talking about either hostile foreign state actors or non-state actors. They may well be sponsors of terror. And if are you actually doing business with them? You're giving money to them. I mean, so anytime that you're paying money like that, you're thinking, oh, that's the easy way out of something. Like, no, what you're doing is you're funding them. So that the next attack is going to be more sophisticated. They're going to have more resources that they're able to turn against us. So I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of people thinking about this as a transactional matter. This is not a transactional matter. This is about the ecosystem. And we're talking fundamentally, this is not just your business and my business, that we're talking about the national security of the United States. And so it's important for us to think about that as an ecosystem, as a nation, what we are going to do, because what I do is going to affect what Doug's options are, and so on, all the way down the road. Unless we are all individually going to become islands, we have to be thinking broadly what's best for me and you.
I think we've all come to understand it. I think it's just at the very beginning, when these things first started, you always wanted to take the easy route if you could, and weren't thinking through, the national security, of course. But today it's become very standard that you don't just pay off. That's why it's so important to the common business person to get help.
Yep.
And it's perfectly okay. I would want, if not one of these guys, all four of them in my corner, if I was having a problem in my business.
Well, Angela, I think one thing that we would all agree on is, in an event, if you don't have trained people, get help. I'm sure Matt has had to testify where somebody's come in and tried to fix it on their own, and they've stomped all over the evidence.
Right.
And then the issue with some of these ransomwares now is they're encrypting what they're taking, and it's called ransacking. And if you can't prove that your data left, you don't know whether you're exposed or not. And so it's important to have somebody come in that knows what they're doing and help you figure that out, rather than a lot of times IT guys want to fix, they're wired to fix, and they try to fix it, and then we come in to do that work, and there's nothing there to know what happened.
Don't jump right into remediation. Yep. Be a problem.
Unplug everything. And
back on the executive side, can you imagine you're an executive at an Ohio company somewhere, and you have to tell all of the people that are paying you, your company, and you have to either make it a public announcement. And it's the branding. It always comes back around the branding, is that you have to go in there, and then all of a sudden you get questions asked you like, why were you prepared? And now you have the microscope on you. And so that's when it's the hardest to be an executive in Ohio or anywhere in the United States, is then there's a expectation among the community that you did work on Saturday to figure this out. And when you have to stand up and you might even have a good communications director, but then they ask one of the department heads and they'll say, or maybe post on social media, we never practiced. So you make a company announcement saying, yeah, we're practiced. And then 3 of your employees in social media say, we never practiced at all.
Yeah.
So you have to live the life of cybersecurity because like we've heard all throughout the whole day is that these are nation state attacks. And so we have to be attuned to that you are going to be subject of an attack sometime in the next several years. And what are you going to do about it? And you got today to get ready.
Okay, Matt, we've all heard what we've came to hear. We're all going to go back to our offices. What do I do when I get back there related to security? What's the first thing I do?
Take a shot. The big thing is really not to panic. So there's a lot of us have difficulty with hard things because there's an emotional connection to it. How many of us don't like going and talking to the accountant? It's like, oh, God, I should have more money in there. There's a lot of shame that is connected to a lot of these things. And so that makes it difficult to get ahead of it. And so to a large degree, the stuff we've been talking about, having a conversation, okay, that can be helpful to get people thinking in those terms. But my advice is not just to be thinking about security very narrowly. We as a business, what is it that we do and how do we get it done? And in really simple terms, top of mind kind of stuff, do we have that sort of thing documented? If we have to expand and open up an operation somewhere else, how are we going to do that? That kind of thinking about growth is a lot more pleasant, but still has us dealing with the same issues about workflows and where our information is and how we're going to get to it. So those kinds of conversations can be framed in such a way that they don't sound so scary. But the important thing is to get it, to document it, to make it available, and to do so in a way that is accessible, maintainable, not something that's a giant sits on the shelf, nobody touches it, something that we can actually refer back to, a playbook.
But still have a shot.
Yeah, still totally have a shot.
How much time do we have? Do we have another?
But I do have one question. How do you vet your vendors, Keeman?
Why don't we go to, gosh, any one of you could do this one.
Yeah, I would start. So there's a SC section in the NIST standard. And I get that question probably once a week, by some school district or city or county. And so the SC section has a list of those things that you need to do. It's going to become a checklist. So a lot of the cyber attacks are coming in through third-party vendors who, even if you are robust at your company, one of your unvetted vendors isn't, and that's where you get your surprise in the next day. So the SC section of the NIST Core 2 standard, I believe there's SC 1 to 10, and you just go ahead and follow those things. Make sure you have those. We had a discussion before where things that are in the contract that, because once you get hit and it's through that vendor, then you're going to wish you had those clauses in your contract because they're the one that are causing your company damage. And so you have to have those clauses to protect your company.
Yeah, and if you're running a firm, don't try and do the IT stuff. You know how to do a deal. You know how to do a contract.
Mm-hmm.
So stay within the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes down to it, okay, when you breach, not if, when you breach my company's data, you're paying for my remediation, right? That's in the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's not in the contract? You want an out? That's how to have that conversation. Talk about it at adult level, not nerds in the basement.
Yes.
Your most common, easy to identify credential for whether it's a hosting company or a service provider is going to be a SOC credential, service organization controls. If they are an audited company and they have a SOC audit report, they will probably proudly display that, and they'll gladly share it with you to prove that they have done their due diligence, they're auditable. They can say, I have protocols and I can prove I follow my protocols. And that then gives you some belief that, yeah, they don't just say they're doing it, they can back it up. And your more mature vendors are going to have that.
And some vendors that may not be accessible. We do a lot of that work. The auditors, IT auditors do. If you're a small firm, you want to really talk to if you're dealing with a small firm, you want to talk to the bigger firm that you're doing service with, maybe not somebody that can afford a SOC, but are they compliant with a framework? The CSF, so when we've talked about, but there's a number of frameworks out there, have them comment on that, an executive summary of the penetration tests that they've done, what their insurance coverage is. It's really a business conversation, as Matt said, not a technical conversation.
So I was going to come back to cloud, but I think we covered enough about cloud. So are we getting close out of time?
Yes.
So remember, we've got 4 experts here, from the industry that make a living at helping companies stay clean and making sure that they're as equipped as possible to the outsiders who are bad guys. I'm not in that group, but I have used organizations like these guys many times. So if I could be of help, I'll be glad to. As a matter of fact, the first guy I ever brought in was Matt. We were being hacked when I was at the dispatch many years ago in the late 90s. And I think it was somebody in Vietnam. We figured that out somehow. Next was Doug, and next was Kurt. So haven't had a chance to work with you, Charles, but we'll get that done soon. So, but certainly don't think you have to put it all on your shoulders. I think that's the key thing, is don't be afraid, at least the first couple of times. You want to get somebody that's gone through this thing before. So I'll turn it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you guys for all of your time and expertise. I know there's a lot of takeaways today, tangible takeaways for the businesses. So I just thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.